It then became clear that the number of those who chewed had increased still more, because many of the three-brained beings who had never previously chewed now began chewing merely out of what is called curiosity, which is one of the peculiarities of the psyche of the three-brained beings of the planet which has taken your fancy. That is to say, curiosity to find out what effect those seeds had, the chewing of which was prohibited and punished by the king with such insistence and relentless severity. I must emphasize here that though the said particularity of their psyche began to be crystallized in your favorites immediately after the loss of Atlantis, yet in none of the beings of former epochs did it function so blatantly as it does now in the contemporary three-brained beings there. They have more of it, perhaps, than there are hairs on a tusuk. So, my boy, when the wise King Canutzion finally became quite convinced that it was not possible by the described measures to extirpate the passion for chewing the seeds of Gulgulian, and saw that the only result of his measures was the death of several who were punished, he abrogated all the measures he had previously taken, and again began to think seriously about a search for some other real means of destroying this evil, lamentable for his community. As I learned much later, owing to a very ancient surviving monument, the great King Canutzion then returned to his chamber and for 18 days neither ate nor drank, but only very seriously thought and thought. It must in any case be noticed here that those latest researches of mine showed that King Canutzion was then particularly anxious to find a means of uprooting this evil, because all the affairs of his community were going from bad to worse. The beings who were addicted to this passion almost ceased to work. The flow of what is called money into the communal treasury entirely ceased, and the ultimate ruin of the community seemed to be inevitable. Finally, the wise king decided to deal with this evil indirectly, namely by playing on the weaknesses in the psyche of the beings of his community. With this aim, he invented a very original religious doctrine corresponding to the psyche of the beings of that time. And this invention of his he spread broadcast among all his subjects by every means at his disposal. In this religious doctrine, it was said, among other things, that far from our continent Ashark was a larger island where existed our Mr. God. I must tell you that in those days, not one of the ordinary beings knew that besides their planet Earth, other cosmic concentrations existed. The beings of the planet Earth of those days were even certain that the scarcely visible white points far away in space were nothing more than the pattern on the veil of the world. That is to say, just of their planet, as in their notions then the whole world consisted, as I've said, of their planet alone. They were also convinced that this veil was supported like a canopy on special pillars, the ends of which rested on their planet. In that ingeniously original religious doctrine of the wise King Canutzion, it was said that Mr. God had intentionally attached to our souls the organs and limbs we now have to protect us against our environment, and to enable us efficiently and profitably to serve both himself personally and the souls already taken to that island of his. And when we die, our soul is liberated from all these specially attached organs and limbs. It becomes what it should really be, and is then immediately taken to just this island of his where our Mr. God, in accordance with how our soul, with its added parts, had existed here on our planet Ashark, assigns to it an appropriate place for its further existence. If the soul has fulfilled its duties honestly and conscientiously, Mr. God leaves it for its further existence on his island. But the soul that here on the continent Ashark has idled or discharged its duties indolently and negligently, that has, in short, existed only for the gratification of the desires of the parts attached to it, or finally, that has not kept his commandments. Such a soul our Mr. God sends for its further existence to a neighboring island of smaller size. Here on the continent Ashark exist many spirits attendant upon him, who walk among us in caps of invisibility, thanks to which they can constantly watch us unnoticed, and either inform our Mr. God of all our doings or report them to him on the day of judgment. We cannot in any way conceal from him either any of our doings or any of our thoughts. It was still further said that just like our continent Ashark, all the other continents and islands of the world had been created by our Mr. God, and now existed, as I've said, only to serve him and the deserving souls already dwelling on his island. The continents and islands of the world are all places, as it were, for preparation and storehouse for everything necessary for this island of his. That island on which Mr. God himself and the deserving souls exist is called Paradise, and existence there is just roses, roses. All its rivers are of milk, their banks of honey. Nobody needs to toil or work there. Everything necessary for a happy, carefree, and blissful existence is there, because everything requisite is supplied there in superabundance for our own and the other continents and islands of the world. This island paradise is full of young and lovely women, and all the peoples and races of the world, and each of them belongs, for the asking, to the soul that desires her. In certain public squares of that superb island, mountains of various articles of adornment are always kept, from the most brilliant diamonds to the deepest turquoise, and every soul can take anything he likes, also without the least hindrance. In other public squares of that beatific island are piled huge mountains of sweetmeats, specially prepared with essence of poppy and hemp. And every soul may take as much as he pleases at any time of the day or night. There are no diseases there, and of course none of those lice or flies that give us all no peace here, and blight our whole existence. The other smaller island to which our Mr. God sends for their further existence the souls whose temporary physical parts have been idle here and have not existed according to his commandments, is called Hell. All the rivers of this island are of burning pitch. The whole air stinks like a skunk at bay. Swarms of horrible beings blow police whistles at every square, and all the furniture, carpets, beds, and so on there are made of fine needles with their points sticking out. One very salted cake is given one a day to every soul on this island, and there is not a single drop of drinking water there. Many other things are also there of a kind that the beings of earth not only would not like to encounter, but not even experience in thought. When I first came to the country of Marad Placi, all the three-brained beings of that country were followers of a religion based on the just mentioned ingenious,